Definitely. Oh, yeah. That works most times. There it is. Yes, it does, yeah.
I was here one. So what are you were thinking of? Yeah, if it's too fast. So much fun. It's not, and it's going there, you're there in the morning. No. Very little about something like you about.
You okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like to be able to see when you're going down.
How we do? Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. Yeah, looking forward.
One hour. 9:15. Yeah, 9:15.
Oh, that's not water.
No.
John.
It's just a, for me, without working, it's. No, it's Friday. Have you been this tomorrow?
No, we're not doing.
Towards the day.
Closed, but not. We have, yeah, we have to. do it.
Days in a row. I'm sleeping in. My name is Daisy, nice to meet you. Oh, Daisy. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. No, I'm actually, I'm here, I am first rabbi, as a new assistant, yeah, well. Thank you. Not assistant rabbi. Having Patrick here. It's.
Yeah. That'll be. We're gonna have an assistant rabbi, and we have an assistant to the rabbis. Clergy assistant. Clergy assistant. Yeah. All right, good morning, everybody. Great to see you guys. So, before we start here, I want to, introduce to everybody Stacy Pomel. She is our new clergy assistant here at Temple. She just started on Monday and she's off to a great start, doing a good job. So if you have any needs from me or the cantor with scheduling something or any questions, you can reach out to Stacy. She can help you. She sits down in the main office by Joy P. So when you're in or after the class, or introduce yourself to Stacy and you get to network. So welcome, Stacy. I'm glad you're here. All right, everybody. So we're gonna let's start with our blessing. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam asher tishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot v'divrei Torah. All right. Just want to make sure okay. Hi, Anita. All right, so let's open back up to our liturgy. Last week we didn't really look at the.
We were on 28.
Liturgy. Thank you, Alfred. We're on page 28. Okay, so last time we talked about the very first line there for those who wear tefillin, and that led to a good conversation about kind of history and philosophies of the Reform movement and our relationship to tefillin and ritual garb. So today I want to look at the liturgy, and then we're going to study the basic sources on the mitzvah of tefillin, so we understand where it comes from and what it's all about. So, so let's here look on page 28. So remember, there are, well, maybe not remember, because I don't think we talked about this last week, but there are two parts to the tefillin. We're gonna see this in the sources that we study, but there's the tefillin for the arm, and then for the forehead. So there's a separate blessing for each one. It's actually putting on the tefillin comprises two mitzvot. Because it's one of the mitzvot is the tefillin of the arm, and one is the tefillin. Okay, so they're separate. Good morning, Silvers. It's separate. That's why there are two lessons. Okay, so the first one, if you want to try reading it with me in the Hebrew, it says Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehaniah tefillin. So you see it there, and in English, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to wind the tefillin. Okay, so when we put the tefillin of the arm on, we wrap it around the arm. That's the wine. Actually, it's interesting that they translated it that way, because lehaniah, the Hebrew verb there, lehaniah means to kind of to place or to lay down.
That's what I've actually heard is.
Yeah, so people will say to lay tefillin, which sounds odd in English because we don't use the word in that way. But wind or put on is more, colloquially how we would use the language, but the Hebrew is to lay, and so that's why people would say to lay tefillin. So that's the blessing for the arm. The blessing for the forehead. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mitzvat tefillin. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. You have sanctified us through your commandments, commanding us concerning tefillin. Okay, why it's like that and not to put it on your head, I don't know. That's how the blessing is formulated, but it is a separate mitzvah to put it on the forehead. And then after you do say that blessing, we do Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, just like after the Shema. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever. Can you speak up?
What's it between mitzvot and mitzvah?
Oh,
I've never seen.
okay, so mitzvah is the singular. Meaning commandment, religious obligation, mitzvah. Mitzvot is the plural.
Okay.
Now mitzvahs, what you notice here, al mitzvahs tefillin, that's a grammatical construct in the Hebrew. It's essentially a contraction. In Hebrew, we have this kind of contraction when you have mitzvah, mitzvah shel tefillin, mitzvah of tefillin. You can contract it into mitzvot tefillin. It's a grammatical, it's a contraction. Okay. Yes, Beth.
Explain how this all happened, why it happened.
Yeah, we're gonna look at the source.
My grandson. Yeah. Went to a class,
Can you speak up so they can
my
hear you?
grandson attends religious school. He's a big enthusiastic, very enthusiastic about Judaism. He sang during the Shining People, had a little part.
Yeah,
He goes to school. He went into the class for the sermon,
yeah,
and he got really shook up. And he said, he didn't feel comfortable. And he told him, teacher, I'm a Reformed Jew. He said, I have a choice. I don't have to do this. No. Yeah, he said that to the teacher. But I think it would be good to know, what's the background? You gotta go with that.
Yeah.
How does it all happen?
yeah. Well, so last week we talked a little bit about kind of the Reform movement and, and and the movement's attitudes toward tefillin and to ritual garments, so forth. Philosophically, we looked at some of the platforms of the movement, or that's talked about that. So if you weren't here last week, you can go online and watch the class on that. But today we're going to look at the sources in the Torah on the mitzvah to go. And it's true, nobody has to, but that's why it says here at the top, for those who wear, right? Okay. And then, notice the instruction there, when winding 3 times around the middle finger, you say this passage. This is a passage from the prophet Hosea. Okay, it's Hosea chapter 2, verse 21 through 22. And that reads, I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in kindness and in mercy. I will betroth you to myself in faithfulness, and you shall know Adonai. Okay, so that's said as part of the putting on the mitzvah to tefillin. Well, I want to do the Torah sources first, but then we can look at the Hosea passage. Because it does teach us an additional dimension of the mitzvah. Okay, and then let's look over at this passage on the left, on page 29. We'll read this. This comes from Midrash. It says, Elisha the prophet, Elisha took off, actually, this isn't Elisha the prophet, this is a different Elisha, one of the prophets. Elisha took off his tefillin from his head and hid them in his hand. He was questioned, what do you have? He answered, the wings of a dove. He stretched his hand, and lo, there were dove wings. And why the wings of a dove rather than wings of other birds? Because the children of Israel are likened to a dove, as it is said, as the wings of a dove are covered with silver. Consider, just as the dove is protected by its wings, so is Israel protected by the mitzvot. Now this passage, see if it gives us information from the Midrash. Yes, it just tells us. So this is a passage, during a story from a rabbi that happens during the Roman period when the rabbis lived under Rome. And it was forbidden by the Roman government to, do certain religious practices and so forth, including wearing tefillin. So he was wearing his tefillin, and then he was being pursued by Roman soldiers. And they caught up, so he took them off and he wrapped them, he's holding them, they caught up to him and asked him, what's going on, what do you have? Then he opened his hand and they had turned into the wings. That's the story in the Torah. And one thing that's interesting about that is that it teaches us something about the early practices of wearing tefillin, which is that the early sages wore them all the time during the day. This happens like in the marketplace. Okay, so it was for a certain time that Jews would wear tefillin throughout the day. Now imagine what that, I mean, some of us get self-conscious or whatever wearing a kippah, right, outside the synagogue. And many Jews kind of don't do it because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. Well, imagine if you're walking around the street wearing tefillin. Okay, but that's what they did. Then there came a time, I don't know exactly how it changed, but I imagine it had something to do with the drawing attention to yourself because of what happened with Elisha, that the practice of wearing tefillin became only something you do in morning prayer. But it started as something you wear all the time. Okay. So let's, any questions about this on the page first before we get to the sources of the mitzvah? Courtney?
One quick thing, actually, in college, I had a friend where she married a guy who was conservative, and they're going to a baseball game. And he hit his star baby, like he took it off, he didn't want to drive. It's just sad that we feel conflict, and yet we're doing something that's good.
Yeah, yeah, and it is, it's true, and, you know, in the world today, it's a valid concern, you know, I mean, we've all seen, you know, the news reports and what's, you know, things that have happened in the New York area recently of, you know, Jews being attacked with violence, you know, because they are Jews and they're identifiable as Jews because of their outward appearance. So, that certainly makes it harder for people who live, you know, in the Haredi community where their entire mode of dress signifies who they are. You know, black coats and black hats and long beards. I mean, they're very identifiable. Those of us in the Reform community have an easier time, I guess, not being identified as Jews because we don't tend to wear distinguishing clothing, although, you know, I wear a kippah all the time, you know, where I go. Now, to kind of relate to the story that you told, Courtney, a few years ago, when I was in Chicago, I traveled with a group of Chicago rabbis to Paris for a trip to learn about Jewish life there. And you know, the Jewish members of the Jewish community that we met with there advised us, you know, to wear a baseball cap when we were walking around Paris, you know, to cover up if we were wearing a kippah. Because it's dangerous, and I've taken that practice when I go into Manhattan or whatever, well, not always, but I will generally wear a baseball cap, just because, to be smart because of what's going on. Sad. Now wear it over, yeah. Bonnie.
You know, I don't think it's a new thing, especially in Paris. And I have lots of friends that want to go to Paris, they've always been anti-Semitic. I have no desire to go to any country and spend my money in a country that's how I feel. But there's a story I worked as a poll worker recently within the last year in Greatman in the firehouse, company 3 in Thompson. And I was sitting there next to the women. And at one point she turned to me. I mean, I did everything I could to like keep my mouth shut, you know, different political beliefs, you know, I'm not, you know, you're not allowed to talk at the polling center. And she turned to me and she said, well, I know you're Jewish because you have a Jewish nose. Now I want you to know, I'm not going to tell you who she was, what she was, because then I'll be considered racist. But I reported it to the election board. They never did anything, because their hands are tied, okay? But they'd sooner go after me, you know, whatever. It's very stressful. I mean, I enjoyed the job, but I'm not gonna, when I told my daughter, she was like, oh.
Yeah.
How could somebody in 2023 look at you, or 2022, and say that? First of all, I don't have a Jewish nose. I mean,
What's the Jewish name?
it's bothering me,
Oh, right.
it's just like weird.
Yeah. So, and there was just an article, in, Newsday the other day about, just the data on the increase in anti-Semitic, violence in the area.
Right.
So, I mean, it's real, you know, and it's scary, Vicky.
I have a question. I'm really sorry. I think you told us last week, but I forgot.
Can you project?
Sorry, I think you mentioned this last week, but I forgot. And I wrote it down, but I can never remember where I write things down. But why is it that that we only wear that men, wear the tefillin only in the morning? And I assumed it was worn, whenever
Tefillin?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, it's only in the morning, but we're gonna look at sources in the text.
Conservative, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, tefillin is a practice only for morning prayer.
Oh,
Yeah, only for morning prayer. But as I said, it was something that was every day. And it became only morning prayer. I don't know the historical development, I'll have to research it, I'm assuming, as I said, I'm assuming it has something to do with the outward appearance and, and threats and so forth. So in that way, it's different from talit, the fringes, remember, we learned that the fringes is something that you wear only in the morning because it's about marking that time when you see, going from seeing distinguishing the colors. That's for talit, that's for the talit. This is different. But this too becomes a positive time-bound mitzvah, meaning it's something that is done at a certain time. It's done during morning prayer. And while while in the traditional classical halakha, it's a mitzvah that only pertains to men because women are exempt. Remember from positive time-bound mitzvot that we talked about in a progressive setting, including in conservative Judaism and in Reform Judaism. It's something that women may do also. We're gender egalitarian, there's no distinction in that one. All right, so what I want to do is look at the sources now in the Torah for mitzvot, for the mitzvah of tefillin. Now, we find it in several places. One place, if you flip in your Siddur to page, let's go to page 66 in the Siddur. Page 66. What is this liturgy called on 66? The Beth-El. Okay, it comes right after the Shema. Beth-El is a passage from the Torah, Deuteronomy chapter 6. Okay, and we use this liturgically, and it includes a reference to tefillin, although in the halakhic literature, this passage isn't identified as the main source of it. Well, I'm going to show you the main source of it, but it's the same thing. It says this, it's just a reiteration of the same thing. But notice here in the Hebrew, in the first paragraph of the Hebrew there, let's see, 3 lines up in the first paragraph, the Hebrew, 3 lines up from the bottom. Ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha. Right? We know that because we say it in the Hebrew and it's translated in the second line from the bottom in the English paragraph. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Okay, so this passage, that statement, which we find in different forms multiple times throughout the Torah, is interpreted by the sages as meaning tefillin. They interpret it literally. Notice them. Right? I mean, you could very easily read that metaphorically as we read other passages in the Torah. Metaphorically, bind them as a sign on your hand, let them be a symbol before your eyes, speaking about the words of the Torah. Okay, but the rabbinic tradition interprets them literally. Bind them as a sign on your hand, meaning take the words of the Torah and put them, and it's not only hand, yad is the word in Hebrew, which means hand, but it also can mean arm. So bind them as a sign on your arm. We do that literally, because inside the tefillin, I should have brought my tefillin, I'll bring it next time. In the tefillin of the arm, the little box, there are little scrolls with this passage and others dealing with this mitzvah written on it. Put it on our arm. Bind them on the arm. Okay, and then the same thing. Yeah, cool. So look, maybe after learning about the mitzvah tefillin, you'll decide like that putting on your grandfather's tefillin could be something very neat. So it's bind it on your arm, it's a sign, and you put it on your forehead. It's a sign. This is a literal reading. And same thing with inscribe them on the doorpost of your house. It's the mitzvah of what? Mezuzah. Okay, so a mezuzah is the same thing. Tefillin are essentially mezuzot for your body. Just like you write the words in the little box that goes on your door, the words are written in the box, your body. It's like putting them on your body. And when you pray, there are commentaries about this. When you pray in the morning, with the tefillin on, it's like you have made your body or into a Torah. Okay, Courtney. Well, I mean, I guess it's related in the sense that, yeah, the prohibition on tattooing and so forth is a prohibition on desecrating the body, which is a holy vessel created by God. When we put on the tefillin, we are making our body like into a Torah, by putting it on there. And the halachot of tefillin, when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, which we're not going to do because we don't need to do that, but there are in Maimonides, for instance, the whole section of the halakha dealing with the halachot of tefillin, specifically how they need to be made and where they need to be placed on it. Well, one of the halachot of tefillin is that they need to be placed on a clean body. Okay, so because it's sacred, you're putting on your body, so you're not supposed to like go work out and just put tefillin on. Your body should be clean to put it on. It does connect with the sacredness of the human body, putting it to school. But
Are they different? I mean, what frame?
there are. So if you go back to page 28, our prayer book tells us, actually page 29. It tells us what's in there, these portions. So you see on the bottom of page 29 in the small. And actually right above it, there's something what Courtney just. Let's look at the small print. Tefillin illustrate Judaism's effort to synthesize faith and deed, wrapping words of Torah around one's body. It's a vivid reminder not merely to recite or to study, but to follow its instructions. Wrapping sacred words around one's head and heart is a reminder that the body too is sacred. It's just what Courtney's talking. When she comes back, she was right. And then the next paragraph. The tefillin contain passages from Deuteronomy and Numbers, known as the Shema and 3 paragraphs. Since the first word after the Shema begins Ve'ahavta, love, tefillin suggests a relationship of affection and intimacy. This is best indicated by the way in which the straps are wound around the fingers, by the verses recited at that shame. The straps wound around the fingers remind one of a wedding. That's why we say, I betroth you, with the passage from Hosea, I betroth you. The 7 windings around the arm have been taken as a symbol of the 7 windings. During the 17th century, it became customary to recite the magnificent wedding formula of God and Israel.
Wow.
So there you get it. So putting on the tefillin is like putting on a wedding. Each day we kind of renew our vows.
And 7. My
The 7.
daughter is walking.
7 circles. That's right.
With you?
Yeah, the 7 circles in a traditional wedding that bride makes around the groom correspond to the 7 wraps around your arm. Yeah, and then and it goes around your finger. That's the wedding band, where that, the covenant with God has covenant of marriage. We have mutual commitments to one another, and so putting on the tefillin each morning is kind of renewing the vows of marriage that we have. Leave. Yeah, on your hand. That's right. Your hand, you wrap it around the hand in such a way that it makes a shim. So it's like it's the first initial. So it's laden with symbols. In terms of the past, so it tells you there that inside the tefillin are little scrolls with these words of Be'ahavta written on them, and then several other passages from the Torah that speak about this. Courtney, when you were out of the room, just on page 29, we pointed out that you look at the bottom of page 29, the second little sentence in small lettering actually speaks exactly to what you said. So there you go. The wrapping tefillin is a reminder that the body is safe. Okay. So I want to show you in Exodus chapter 13. This is the main source for the mitzvah of tefillin, and so there's good commentaries on it. So this comes right after the passage in the Torah about the rituals after the 10th plague. God brought us out of Egypt. Then it says to do all the rituals, eat unleavened bread for 7 days, tell the story, all those things that we know about. And here at the bottom of the chapter it says, and when in time to come, a child of yours asks you, saying, what does this mean? The rituals of Passover. You shall reply, it was with a mighty hand that Adonai brought us out from Egypt. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, Adonai slew every male firstborn in the land of Egypt, the firstborn of both human and beast. Therefore I sacrifice to Adonai every first male issue of the womb, but redeem every male firstborn among my children. This is from the earlier part about what we know as the ritual of Pidyon Haben. You may have heard it. It's like there's a ritual born. We don't need to get into Pidyon Haben. But over here it says, and so it shall be as a sign upon your hand and as a symbol on your forehead, that with a mighty hand Adonai freed us from Egypt. Okay, so in this source right here, the tefillin, we wear the tefillin specifically for a reason, which is what?
Be close to God.
Well, but what does it say? Memory of the Exodus. Okay, memory of the Exodus. The tefillin, the Torah tells us specifically that the tefillin are a sign to remind us of the Exodus from. Okay. I saw a hand, Martha. Go ahead. Martha, you'll need to unmute. There.
Okay, I am. For me, one of the interesting thing is that the tefillin, when you use it on your head, it sits on the pineal gland, which is the seat of intuition. Colloquially, people call it the third eye. And for me, what it means is that not only we have to believe it at the cognitive level, but at the spiritual level, a metaphysical level. And it goes along to what it says to us right now during Passover. Believe that you were there. Believe that that you were at Mount Sinai. Believe that that God got you out of Egypt. I think it goes along with that. And that's interesting for me to look at it from the spiritual point of view. Why should we do the tefillin and what it means to put it on the seat of the intuition.
Oh, good, very nice. Yeah, very nice, Martha. Okay, and so it's the tefillin is a remembrance that God brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. So we do the physical act is placing it on the hand, on the arm, okay? Now, interestingly, where does your tefillin go? Which arm? Left if your right hand. If you're left-handed, it goes on your right. Okay, in other words, the tefillin goes on your weak arm. Any insight as to why that might be the case?
You need the strength to defend yourself.
The strength that it, okay, can you say a little more?
In case there's trouble, your non-dominant arm is sacred because you had the tefillin.
Okay,
And so that if there was trouble, you would not use.
oh, I see, you need your strong arm. Okay, that's it, that's interesting. I was thinking about it in a little bit of a different sense. Vicky? Your tefillin goes on your weak arm.
On your week.
So the question is why? And it suggests, the verse suggests it.
Just really quickly, there's your weak arm and there's your non-dominant arm.
Uh-huh,
It's the same thing, but I think that the way one refers to it is, it's like, my left arm isn't necessarily weak, it's just not my.
Okay.
You know,
all right, but what would be the significance of putting this tefillin on your non-dominant arm?
one uses, well, especially if you were, for the period of time when one walked around with it all the time, can you really write with?
Well, okay, so a practical reason, like that's kind of what Linda was suggesting too, like you need to be able to use your stronger arm, your dominant arm, but on a spiritual level, Howard,
It probably relates to the mighty hand language
definitely.
in the
Yeah.
Torah. I'm not sure exactly how, perhaps that we're reminded that God's hand is mightier than God's arm is mightier than the one that we're using, that we're placing its filling on.
Yeah, a little further, Courtney?
Perhaps it's because it's providing, it's providing the strength to you.
Yeah.
Your brain.
Strength, yeah. And then what's the source of our strength?
It should be the Torah.
Torah and God. Okay, so that it goes on our less dominant arm, God, that where we are weak or where we are vulnerable, like God is our strength. Okay, just a simple kind of spiritual message, but that God is a source of strength. Okay, so I want to look here at some commentary on this passage. Let's look at Rashi. Okay, let's see, because there's a little grammatical stuff, but okay, let's look at this from Ramban, not Maimonides, 13th century Spain. He says, now the fundamental reason of this commandment is that we lay the script of the Exodus from Egypt upon the hand and upon the head, opposite the heart and the brain, which are the pivots of thought. Thus, we are to inscribe on parchment the scriptural sections of Kadesh. Oh, here he tells us what the verses are. Okay, these different passages from the Torah and enclose them in the phylacteries because of the phylacteries is the English word for tefillin. Because of this commandment wherein we were charged to make the exodus from Egypt for frontlets between our eyes. We are also to inscribe and enclose in the phylacteries the sections of Shema Yisrael and V'Hayahim Shemoah from these are the passages of the traditional Shema. Because we are charged to have the commandments of the Torah also for frontlets between our eyes, that is, as it is written. This is why we also inscribe on parchment these two sections, being for frontlets, even though the Exodus is not mentioned in them, for they contain the commandments of the unity of God, the memorial of all commandments, the doctrine of retribution, which states that the consequence of disobeying the commandments is punishment and that blessings come in the wake of obedience, and the whole foundation of the faith. Now of the phylactery of the arm, scripture says it shall be for a sign on your hand, which the rabbis explain as referring to the left arm, which is opposite the heart. Oh, that's what he gives us for that. Now, when you put the tefillin on, and so the box of the tefillin sits on your bicep. So that when you're standing like this, it points to the heart. Okay, points to the heart. By way of the truth, the mystic lore of the Kabbalah, the verse, it is because of this, which the Eternal did for me, is similar to this is my God and I will glorify him. The verse here thus states that it was because of God's name and God's glory that God did for us, brought us forth out of the land of Egypt. This shall be for a sign unto you on the arm of your strength. Not sure what he means by that because it goes on your weak arm. Just as it is written, for thou art the glory of your strength. Thus, the sign of the phylactery is similar to the sign of circumcision and the Sabbath. And since all emanations are one perfect unity, which is alluded to in the sign on the arm, our ancestors have received the tradition from Moses, who received it from the mouth of the Almighty, that all four sections of the scripture inscribed in the phylacteries, as described above, are encased in one compartment. He gives all kinds of scriptural verses. Okay, then it gives us place them, we are to lay them at the place of remembrance, which is between the eyes at the beginning of the brain. It is there that remembrance begins, by recalling the appearances of persons and events after they have passed away from us. That's nice. You're remembering the people. I actually learned this from a colleague, a friend when we were in rabbinic school, about putting on the tefillin, and I do this practice now, when I wrap the 7 times around, that for each set of the 7, I think about a person to whom I am bound, not someone who's died. That's what Rambam is talking about, remembering people that have died. But I wrap and I think about people that I'm bound to, because it's about binding. So I'll be like Aaron, Lindsay, Zachary, like around that way, because putting on the tefillin reminds us that we're bound to God and covenant, but also we have covenant with people in our lives. These frontlets circle around the whole head with their straps, while the loop rests directly over the base of the, which guards the memory. And the expression between your eyes means that they are to be placed upon the middle of the head, not towards one side. It may be said that in the middle of the head, there are the roots of the eyes, and from these stems the power of sight. Similarly, the verse, nor make you any baldness between your eyes for the dead. I don't know what that is. Thus, the expression between your eyes mentioned here, in the case of the frontlets, also refers to the identical place. It is to explain this point that the phylactery of the head is not to be placed between the eyes. So when you put it on, it doesn't go like right here. It goes up here, in the middle, but at the top of. So anyway, Ramban goes on and on. You can see. What else? Okay, wow. Look at that. Okay, so we'll have to go, we're gonna skip the rest of Ramban. Yeah,
Question, is it 7 because it's 7 days in a week?
Well, 7 is a symbolic number in
Okay.
Judaism, so there can be a numerous symbolic significances.
Okay.
So the 7 days of the week, this one pointed to the 7 blessings in the wedding liturgy. There's also in the Kabbalah. Raise your hand if you've learned anything about Kabbalah. Like, have you seen the picture of the Spirot? Let's look at this for a second.
A long time.
Yeah, I'm gonna show you something, this in Kabbalah. Okay, let's look at this one. See if I can get- Share for you. Okay, so this image right here. I don't know if you people have seen this before. Okay, so this is a picture in Kabbalah, the tradition of Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah teaches this idea that there are 10 dimensions to God. God is one, but there are 10 aspects. And that it's got think of this as like kind of the spiritual DNA map of God. And that the divine energy of God flows kind of from the top through these manifestations, these different, they're called spherotes. And then ultimately manifests into the world through the bottom. It's like a funnel. Okay, funnel through which divine energy flows and then manifests at the bottom. So at the top is what the Kabbalah calls Ein Sof, infinite. And then God makes God's self manifest into the world by kind of sending divine energy through the spherode, and it goes like this. Like it's all mixing around and here. These are different manifestations of God, and then kind of emerges through the bottom, which is Malkut, or also the name is Shekhinah. Shekhinah is the indwelling presence of God in the world. Anyway, how does this all relate to tefillin? Well, it has to do with the spherode. There are seven what are called upper spherode, and I have to look back at how it's all pretty abstract and I can't remember everything. But bottom line is the Kabbalah teaches that there are 7 upper spherode that are like kind of concealed from our view, as it were. Like we don't have can't access them. But that which are the upper manifestations of God, and then the 3 lower ones. So the 7 on the arm, also in Kabbalistic tradition, kind of symbolize the 7 upper spherot, and then the wraps around the finger 3 symbolize the 3 lower ones. So that like having the tefillin on is kind of recreating the spiritual DNA of God on your body.
Come on.
Yeah, now,
So the retired computer programmer, I could never retire, and marketing programmer also. The
yeah,
diagram you showed, like,
yeah,
the bottom, it looks like to me, these are processes, you know?
yeah,
And there's 2 lines to each process. Like there's an inbound and outbound, you know, for process.
okay,
And then the start of the process could be the bottom circle.
yeah,
So, and that's how, if you try to program this kind of a thing, he would probably look at it this way.
yeah, very nice. So I don't want to get too deep into the Kabbalistic stuff now, but that's just part of the symbology of the tefillin in the Kabbalistic view. Martha, is that an old hand or a new hand?
No, I was talking about the 7 being symbolic. To what you said, the 7 emanations of God. You have 10 But the way we reach it actually is from the Mahuto. And that's where the Shekhinah lives. And the yogis talk about the 7 chakras, the 8 chakras.
Okay,
And Makuto equates to the root chakra. But in Judaism, we actually move up. We connect to God through the first Makuto. And that's what the 7 is very symbolic. And there is 7 under and 7 up. And there is a book that is called The Development of the Soul. And it talks about that very, very clearly what the number 7 means.
okay,
It's
good.
very significant in Kabbalah.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Martha. Thank you for that parallel. So looking back here, in Exodus 13, this was actually what I wanted to share. The idea of the sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead is said twice in the chapter. So I showed you the other verse that I hadn't intended. This is the one, verse 9. And this shall serve you as a sign on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, in order that the teaching of Adonai may be in your mouth, and with a mighty hand Adonai freed you from Egypt. So this was the Rashi stuff. Rashi comments over here. Upon your hand, al yadcha. This is so interesting because Rashi is pointing, it says here, upon your hand, on the left hand. That is why the word is written like this, yadcha. Okay, I don't know, you just have to look at the Hebrew, Yud Dalet Kaf Hey. You see that over there in Rashi? But over here, it doesn't have that. It says Al Yadcha with the final Kaf. So Rashi is working from a version of the biblical text that's different. Or at least he's citing the Talmudic passage down here that has a different version of the text. But that the word is spelled out, Yadcha with a hey. So what does he say? It says it's written in its full form, not Yadcha, which is what we see here. So that we should explain it by dividing the word into 2. Yad, and then ko. This Hebrew word would be ko. Kafeh, which means weak, as meaning the hand that is weak. Okay, let's look at the Talmudic passage. Let's see what it's. Yeah, let's look at this. This is actually interesting. This is a Talmudic discussion of tefillin. It says, did Rabbi Bar Rav Huna say this at the midst of phylacteries applies at night, but doesn't Rabbi Bar Rav Huna say if it is uncertain what one removes his phylacteries at night? Okay, so that's the early original practice that you wore tefillin during the day, but then took it off at night. And it notes, one may not don phylacteries on Shabbat when the mitzvah does not apply. Okay, so the mitzvah of, we don't wear tefillin on Shabbat. And this is not because of doing work of putting tefillin on. Any guesses as to why we don't wear tefillin on Shabbat morning? Courtney?
For a day of rest, you're not utilizing that arm.
What's that?
Is it like the day of rest with Shabbat because we're not supposed to work?
Well, but it's not because of that. You might think that, but that would be a reasonable assumption, but it's actually not because of that. Howard?
The tefillin are a reminder of our covenant with God.
Yeah,
And Shabbat is likewise a reminder of our covenant with God.
Exactly.
So we don't need to be reminded.
so you don't need, it's reductive, that's right. So, from the Kiddush in Shabbat, when we do the Friday night Kiddush, part of the prayer says, we have to sing through it, but it says, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, Shabbat kodesh v'ahavu ratzonu kilanu, zikaron lema'aseh b'reishi. Zikaron means a reminder. Zikaron, a reminder of the work of creation. Zikaron lema'aseh b'reishi. Kihu yom tiv, let me cry kodesh. Zecher Litziyat means the reminder of the Exodus region. And we just learned that the tefillin is also a reminder of the Exodus region. So Shabbat, the whole day itself is a reminder. So you don't need it. That's why we don't wear tefillin on Shabbat morning. But if you're a Reformed Jew, and you're only accustomed to attending services on Shabbat, you would never see teeth. Okay, which is why lots of our congregants, in addition to the whole thing of like Reformed just that feels more Orthodox or whatever, in addition, many Reformed Jews grow up never seeing tefillin. Why? Because they only come to synagogue on Shabbat, and you don't wear tefillin.
I was just gonna, yeah, you basically just said it, but what I was thinking while you were talking is that back in the day, during the week, you're either working or you're at the market or whatever, and on Shabbat, hopefully, you're someplace praying, so you don't need the addition of having the tefillin, because you're with the community praying together.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, very nice. What else? Other hand, yeah, Bill.
I was thinking about, what memory is, you know, when somebody says to you, I'm gonna remind you of this, I'm gonna, it's sort of annoying to remind your wife or whatever. And, you need to be reminded that, this word in here is all over the place,
Yeah,
that we forget what to do.
that's right.
We need to be reminded.
We do need to be reminded. So our tradition is big on that. That the importance of tangible reminders. And I think I talked about this last time. Like if you say to yourself, you know, if you think of something that you need to do in your day, you know, you gotta pay a bill or you gotta do whatever it is you need to do, and you tell yourself like, I'll remember to do that later. You might remember, but there's chances are pretty good that you're gonna forget, right? So what do? We write it down. So that you can see your post-it note, you know, or your notebook or your phone or whatever, says, and then you remember, oh yeah, I gotta do that. Because we as human beings need tangible reminders so that we don't forget. Judaism recognized that way early on. And says you've got to put on tefillin, and you need to write mezuzah on your door, so that anytime you walk in and out of the door, when you pray in the morning, you remember your responsibilities. You know, otherwise, just to say like, that I'll remember, chances are pretty good you're. And that plays out, I mean, I think that can play out in a number of different ways, certainly on the very simple level, remembering to do mitzvot, you know, during the day. You put on the tefillin, and then the tefillin, let's see if it's still there, but when you put it on, yeah, a little bit, you can see on my arm, see it leaves a little impression on your arm that lasts for a little while through the day. So you feel it, you see it, it's like, oh, I've got, you know, that's a tangible reminder. And then also I think more broadly, or more in a more meta sense, putting on the tefillin and having mezuzah and so forth. These things are they contribute to the formation of identity and consciousness. You know, if you do these things, I mean, you feel it. Whereas if you just say, like, I don't need that, I just remember, then there's less of a, there are less factors to you know, contribute to identity formation. Any thoughts on that? Howard?
Well, I just wanted to say that you spoke about how if you're a Reformed Jew, you might never see people wearing tefillin, and I'm thinking of the two times that made an impression on me when I saw people with tefillin, and they both came as a surprise. One was on a flight to Israel, waking up you're sleeping on and off on an airplane, and I remember waking up. It was, I don't know, it was roughly 2 or 3 in the morning on my watch, and there were a bunch of men in the back of the
Right.
airplane.
Right.
Praying because the sun was coming out outside the airplane.
Yeah,
And we're filling, and so that, I just wasn't expecting,
right.
but it's real.
You're gonna see it, but it's possible that say like a child who's, who's growing up in our congregation. And would never see tefillin, and then they take a flight. And they see some men like with it on, he's just like, what is, I mean, like, and so. I think exposure to, to these kinds of things is something that's important, and we need to have a consciousness. Of like, if our congregants fully gather on Shabbat, they're not gonna see this, they should know, so that's part of what Mel was talking about at the Sunday school, which we do with Temple Israel. We had last week was like a tefillin lesson, so that they at least see it and learn a little bit. I want to show you, this is in the Hebrew, this is a commentary of Rabbi Yosef Chaim, a Sparta commentator, and I just want to point out something that he says here. He said, so he pointed the verse, it should be a sign on your hand and a remembrance between your eyes, so that the words of Torah will always be in your mouth. So he says here, Tefillin shel yad matzil mishpichut dami. Okay, that means that the tefillin of the arm should kind of like, well, the word is rescue you, but it's more like, I think, like kind of prevent you from spilling blood. That we can use our arms, to harm people. Right? And that wearing the tefillin on your body, again, this consciousness formation, putting sacred items on your body can be a teacher to remind you, that your limbs are sacred and designated for sacred purposes, not for like punching people or causing harm to people, and in a variety of ways that we can use our arms for it. And then he says, V'shel the tefillin shel rosh, of the head, matzil min haga'ava. Okay, so that means that saves you from arrogance. Okay, so that like putting it on your head, again, like kind of placing the Torah scroll on your head as a reminder to, think humbly, and not gain excessive pride. So there are lots of beautiful interpretations, of these mitzvot, and as we go through the liturgy, we'll actually see more, because some other parts of the liturgy refer back to tefillin, although not explicitly, but we'll see how they do. Let's see, I want to see if he says anything else. Yeah.
Exactly what you're saying, because a lot of Catholic people, they wear a cross, right? So why are you wearing a cross? It's supposed to be a reminder of who you are. As an observant Catholic, that there are rules you follow. Not just advertise, you know what I'm saying? It's a reminder.
Okay, and you're right, and Jews were Jewish start, it's a reminder, it's an identity marker, it's all kinds of things. But the tefillin while it's not a mitzvah to wear a Jewish star, it is a mitzvah to wear it. This is something that our tradition sees as a religious duty for the same reasons, all of these reasons that we've been talking about, to create a concrete, tangible reminder of who you are and what the values and principles that you're obligated to, and your relationship with God, so that it should always be with you, through the day, and the words of Torah should always be in your mouth, etc. I wonder, as all of you who are students in the liturgy consider, what we're learning and so forth. These are also opportunities to experiment with some of the stuff that we're learning. So, Bonnie, you mentioned that you have your grandfather, somebody like, or sitting there, maybe you've never. But maybe you could try putting them on one day and just see like. If any of this kind of, these symbols and ideas and so forth come to life for you, you may find that. You may not. But the invitation as a Reformed Jew, in contrast to say if we were learning this at Young Israel, where they would be teaching us that this is a mitzvah, here's why, and here's how you do it. Here, we're learning it from the sense that this is a potential avenue of meaning for you. It's a to you, so maybe give it a try sometime, not because you have to, but because it can enhance your spiritual
Well,
life.
my grandfather was my everything.
Yeah, so
Probably great.
like, well, I mean, and sometimes you don't know. I want to share an essay that I wrote with about tefillin with you. Maybe we'll do it in the class, or maybe I'll send it to you. But I wrote an essay about the mitzvah of tefillin and its meaning for me. And I think I talked in there about something that Abraham Joshua Heschel said, which is that in the realm of the spiritual, oftentimes you have to do before you can understand.
It's like when the people said
It's
you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, that's where Heschel talks about that like, you can look at this and you may have seen somebody putting on tefillin and you look at it and you're like, that looks weird. Or that, what are they doing? Or how, why would they do that? And you just can't understand the impact of it unless you actually do it. Because visually or just reading about it in books doesn't convey it. And that was the case for me, for sure. So, I just invite you to consider that. Maybe you'll give it a try.
It used to smell like my grandfather.
Yeah, right.
You open the bag, you just smell it. It's old Catholic.
Wow, yeah,
Right, like Madeline,
right,
like that.
yeah.
You have to be 13,
What's that?
you have to be 13 years.
Well, you don't have to, but it becomes obligatory at 13
Okay.
because you're a bit, it's a mitzvah.
Right.
Yeah, but younger children can put them on as for educational purposes or to try it out.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. All right, there's a lot of other good stuff on tefillin, but I think we'll stop here for today. So next week, I will be away, but our class will meet and Cantor Adam is gonna teach class next week. So I'll tell him where we left off. Maybe he'll do something on tefillin, maybe he'll do something else, but it's an opportunity to learn with a different perspective.
Great vacation.
So, thank you very much.
Have a nice vacation. How you doing? Happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you so much.
What age?
Yeah, she's 14. Right.
14.
My daughter turned 14 on the 14th.
Wow.
Of her golden birthday.
I never forget.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Glenda, Judy, I'm glad you could join us. Good to see you guys.
Well, I couldn't log in, so I hope I wasn't pestering you.
Pestering me, what do you mean? What do you mean? How would you be pestering me?
Well, because I kept trying and trying, and I thought,
Didn't see that you were trying. And
oh,
that's
good,
Where you were, I thought maybe you were like,
oh, good.
failing.
I'm not insulted. You didn't know I was trying.
Right, and Shelley, go ahead down, like. You all.
Yeah.
All right, have a great day.